Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce December Friday Focus, where we have our legislative roundtable. Thank everybody for joining us. We have a number of stakeholders represented, including our towns, our utilities, healthcare providers, and quite a few others. And Jeff Tarte is going to be leading the discussion today. But before we do that, we want to recognize Jennifer Huskey, who's on the line from Novant Health. And Jennifer is going to give us a little bit of a healthcare update. Jennifer has actually sent a document that I'm going to be sharing. And then later on, we're going to have this particular document on the Chamber's website. So I think everybody can see the document now. Jennifer, do you want to walk us through a little bit of a healthcare update from Novant?
Yes, absolutely, Bill. Thank you so much. Typically, as you guys know, I'm Jen Huskey. I'm non-clinical. So what I have provided for you guys today is an FAQ type format around the vaccine that is such exciting news in the pandemic battle, I guess is the best word. So as of yesterday, actually, this information came out to our team on Wednesday. And as of yesterday, Novant started giving our phase 1 inoculations. So very, very exciting and very current information. And as Bill said, this will be ready for you on the website later today. I'm not going to read this to you. I'm just going to hit the high notes. But did that pop up on your screen or just mine?
Just yours, I think.
Okay, there. Sorry about that. It was reminding me to get on this call. Okay, so just a quick note or quick notes about the vaccine. There's been a lot of questions around how this is different and why people need to get this vaccine. So I'm just going to run through these FAQs. So what makes this vaccine different from previously understanding like the flu vaccine is that this is not a live virus. Basically, it was described to us as team members that consider this that your body is a three-legged stool. We are introducing something, this vaccine into your system and helping your body learn to fight it by making the fourth leg of the stool. So it's different than any other vaccine that we've ever made before, and the progress and the speed with which this has come safely to the market is absolutely outstanding. And with the future being really bright for this same process and this same mapping system available for other diseases, cancer being the number one on the top of everybody's list. One of the quick questions, or a couple of the quick questions we've been getting is, does it have preservatives? Do I have to worry about allergies? And we tend to not like to use the word side effects. Anytime you get an inoculation or an immunization, you might have some swelling at the site. It does not contain preservatives. It is not grown in eggs like the flu vaccine has been in previous years. So you don't need to worry about that if you have an egg allergy. The timeline, I think, is super important and very interesting to the general public. So you'll see we just started phase 1A yesterday. So all of those very determined and dedicated frontline leaders, whether it's at Novant Health or any other healthcare system in the area, they started getting inoculations this week. So they are dealing with this and have been holding on strong and doing what's best for the public since this really hit the United States. So they are phase 1A. Phase 1B is folks with chronic conditions and immunosuppressed systems. They will be in phase 1A. Phase 2 is our teachers, other frontline workers that really need to get inoculated and ready to move forward past this virus. Phase 3 is then K-12 students with a big fat asterisk around this vaccine is not currently ready for anybody under the age of 16. And when I asked about that in our team meeting, it's because it simply wasn't tried on people under age of 16. So that's the way we're moving forward. So if they are high school students and have their parents' permission, they are able to get this vaccine. The goal here is to get to what we call herd immunity. I'm sure you've heard tons about that, but we need 75 to 80% of the entire United States to get this vaccine for that herd immunity to happen. Additionally, we are recommending at Novant Health that if you have had COVID, and I believe we have a few people on this call that have shared that with us, that we still recommend you get the vaccine. There have been people in the trials that have had vaccine or had COVID and also gotten the vaccine with no side effects. So, Bill, if you'll scroll down to the next page for me, please. Again, we've already sort of talked about, is it safe, why it's safe. The short-term effects are what we call expected effects, not side effects. Long-term is to be determined at this point, but as you know, like I said, it's a different type of vaccine than we've ever had in the history of the Republic. And let me think, I think that might be all that I need to share about this. Specifically, is there anything else at the bottom of that last page? Bill, I think that's it.
Safe for pregnant women. Can children receive the vaccine? Right. I think you've already covered that.
Yep.
Jennifer, you guys did an outstanding healthcare presentation about 2 months ago, and I know that there were plans once the vaccines rolled out. Have we moved forward in the plans to maybe have an updated presentation?
Yes. We are currently waiting. As you can imagine, Dr. Priest, who is the lead physician for the entire market as far as the greater Charlotte area, he has been inundated with requests for public speaking engagements, as you can imagine, as this started to actually not just be a pipe dream, but actually roll out. So we are going to be sharing all of the places and times and how to access these calls. There won't be one just specifically for the Lake Norman Chamber, but we will give you all of the details and all of the information so that anybody can join any of these at any time as soon as they become available. We need to get through this first phase, and then we'll be able to share that information with you guys to see Dr. Priest and kind of get more of a clinical viewpoint.
And I know yesterday there was approval on the second vaccine, although it still had to have one more hurdle to get the, I think the FDA giving its final blessing. But will Novant be giving both vaccines, or are you?
We expect to be. It's all based on what is shipped to us as a healthcare system. As you've probably seen in the news, certain states get certain amounts, their allotment, if you will. And it is, I'm going to make sure I say this, it is super important that you get the second shot as well. This is not a one shot and done. This is a 2-shot system. And to your point, Bill, we were told as of, I guess, Tuesday, that it does not matter which you get first if you happen to get the other vaccine or the other manufactured vaccine as your second shot or your first shot, and then the Pfizer one that's currently available. Everything works in tandem.
And there may be a 6-month booster. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not sure about the booster, but the second shot is within a certain amount of days. And if I quoted it, I'm sure I'd be wrong, but it's pretty soon after. It's like a 3-week window, something like that.
Yeah, the Pfizer vaccine, the second shot will be given at day 21, and the Moderna vaccine will be given at day 28.
There you go.
Our healthcare expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Jennifer, we have really appreciated Novant Health, Huntersville Medical Center, for being the sponsor in 2020 of our Focus Friday programs. We've had a number of them. We've had some special Focus Fridays as we've rolled out. I think the one thing that this Chamber of Commerce has really tried to do is make sure our membership stayed informed about what was going on, not only with the healthcare issues, but the PPP. And so we have really worked Jeff Tarte this year. But thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Novant, for being a part. And I know we have Luke McDonald representing Novant also, and he probably will have some comments as we start moving into our actual healthcare, our legislative agenda. So at this point, Jennifer, do you have anything else to add?
Trisha, I just saw Trisha's chat question pop up. That is to be determined. It is significantly based on the timing of us receiving the the shots from the government. So for instance, every team member at Novant Health has been asked to sign up. We've received emails from the Department of Health and Human Safety, and we have to sign our names, sign ourselves up through this email, and then we just wait our turn. So as soon as I have that information, I will make sure that I am able, this is, I don't want to say ever changing like it was in March, but the timing of it is evolving as we move through our phase, 1A, 1B, et cetera. So as soon as I have that, I will definitely get it to Bill and Sylvia.
And for those of you watching this on YouTube later, Commissioner Sisson had asked what's the timing process of the vaccination. So Jennifer, again, thank you very much. And what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this program over to Jeff Tarte. Jeff Tarte is our public policy chair for the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce in 2020. And congratulations to Jeff, because he's going to be the public policy chair in 2021 as well, when Erica Erlenbach takes the helm of the Chamber of Commerce. Jeff, this is your show.
Well, Bill, appreciate everybody for joining us this morning. First of all, let me state the intent of today is to start the process for formalizing the Chamber's legislative agenda. And really what I want to use a majority of the time today is just to educate and share the process, because I'm not sure we've ever done that in the past. To understand if we're going to engage with Raleigh and engage with the state legislator, what's the options, what's the best means to advocate for and advance these agendas. And we've got various constituencies, from business associations, individual businesses, municipalities, major corporations, small business, and what we'll need to differentiate a little bit, and we'll talk about over time, is those things where you as an enterprise or an entity seek to have the chamber participate in advocating your particular issue, as well as most of us on this discussion this morning are actually chamber members. So we also have, wear multiple hats, all of us, in that we are representing the chamber itself, and that chamber will have its own set of initiatives that are really a compilation of all of your ideas, but things that will impact the chamber moving forward. And so we'll talk about how we build those lists, or multiple lists, if you will, that I'm going to challenge you to think through. And then at least my personal goal, and I think the goal as we talk about internally in the chamber, is to really be able to formalize and put in stone by maybe the end of January our legislative agenda. I mean, they're going to be pretty close. There's things that carry over from term to term. But again, what I want to do is turn this into it's going to be a little bit of a tutorial at the beginning. And I sent out a document that walks through some of the things I want people to understand how the process works. And it's way beyond for all those that are the municipal elected officials who have an appreciation that you don't just show up for town hall day, which is a day set aside in Raleigh where all the municipal elected officials and county officials show up, roam the hallways, visit with their legislators, and share their legislative agendas and say, here's all the goodies and things that we need help with. Candidly, if that's the first time you're talking about the issues, in a lot of cases, you're probably too late, at least for the current session. So what I want to do is jump in and take you through the processes and how we segment and help prioritize the needs. We were talking a little bit at the beginning, one of the first things, and it's very common to do, everybody has so many needs. And think about it as a CEO, or think about it as an elected official. When all your department heads come to you with a laundry list of priorities and needs, and things that end up with a budget tag that is greater than your entire organization's budget, it's very hard to know where to start on that list. And it also gets exacerbating in the sense that, okay, what's really important, and where can I help? And that breaks down typically for legislators and into a couple things, and we'll go through this, is the things that will be easy lifts and the things that will be very difficult but important lifts. And so I think the first purpose and objective of any list is to really be able to segment those. And we'll talk about how we go about doing that. And that'll help your legislators know timing wise. A lot of you may or may not be familiar. The legislature goes into what's called a biennium session. So they're in for a 2-year period. So what will start about mid-January, this newly elected body will go into what's called the long session. And it will start, like I said, that they'll go into session in mid-January. They basically recess for a couple weeks. They're working behind the scenes. They're just not holding committees and things yet. Those don't typically begin until early February, but they're kind of working on their priority of things. And the budget begins at that point, day one. The governor's preparing his budget and the legislators are preparing theirs. I'm going to kind of share inside baseball as we go along. Recognize Vermont and North Carolina are considered the 2 strongest legislative bodies in the United States. All the power, good, bad, or indifferent, resides in the legislatures. We have a weak governor structure, like the weak mayor structures, as we sometimes refer to. I will tell you, when the governor prepares their budget, oftentimes most legislators don't even look at it. They're really concentrated on the budget that they're creating, and it's thousands of man hours and hundreds of people that work on it. And it will become important, because what you want to understand and appreciate, you will be able to address some of your needs. You need to segment and identify which part of the budget is going to be impacted by or need appropriations if there's a cost associated with it. So with that, it also aligns with committee assignments. And we'll spend a little bit more time in what that means. But it's really important to identify where your initiative, issue, piece of legislation is going to reside and where it's going to run through the process. So with that, following this list, I'm going to run down it kind of randomly. You need to segment, and I'm just going to use, because I had the Cornelius legislative agenda, and there's a full page of 6-pitch font items. I mean, it's a long list and they're all important things, but what I would suggest doing for any group is separate policy issues and positions from things that need legislative action. Okay. And by legislative action, you're going to need some piece of legislation written and passed, voted on, whether that is in an individual bill, buried in some other bill, and or put into the budget directly. And we'll talk, and again, there's some nuances around that. First, things you just want to advocate for, that let people know the town of Davidson supports XYZ. Cornelius supports, and Huntersville and Davidson all support, we want a magistrate. Is it just we're raising our hand and saying we would like to have one? Or do we really want to have legislation written and changed and require that position to be created? Those are 2 very different activities and levels of effort. Next thing that I said, and I think we tend to focus at the state level predominantly. We're looking at legislative things, but don't overlook the ability to pursue certain things at a federal level. Bigger lift, obviously, if we're taking that to our congressional delegation. But those are things you do need to segment. The subset of that, though, is to have an appreciation. If we're doing something at the state level, is it touched or impacted by federal statute? And sometimes we overlook that. And there's things, as an example, around MUMPO. MUMPO has some things that's driven by US DOT. So we have to have an appreciation when the governmental agencies' rules and regs are going to influence something we're trying to do at a state or local level. I'm going to come back to in a minute, which is the next thing on my list, is these top questions. And we'll talk about why those are important, but it will help you frame how you position your things, your priorities. Next thing I made a comment about is, can we identify common needs versus single desires? And common needs, I'll just use the magistrate as an example. If you come with 3 towns to the legislature and say, we need this, it's kind of why we did the transportation advisory board years ago, is multiple voices carry more weight than just a single individual need. It just is typically the reality. The place where that will have an impact, though, or may be different, is the difference between public and local bills. It is really important to have an appreciation to be able to identify whether your request would required in a public bill or whether we would do it through local statute. And the difference is a public bill is any piece of legislation that requires 15 or more counties to be impacted by that legislation. So it could be something that impacts, if it's a statewide issue, obviously it will be public, but even if it impacts 15. So this is going to sound kind of strange, but if you had a bill that impacted 15 counties and you could politely get one county to back off or back out of that need and had 14, passing local bills are infinitely easier to run through. And here's kind of an inside baseball, the kind of unwritten rule between the members. If you have a local bill and it doesn't impact anybody else around you, the kind of unwritten rule is stay out of everybody's business. If you will take care of my local stuff, I'll take care of your local stuff, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. And I surely don't want that to happen in my district. But so a local bill is, and the more local, I'll give you an example. We did it in Cornelius a couple sessions ago where we were the town came and they wanted to eliminate all the donut holes within the town boundary. And a donut hole is where you have in effect an ETJ area surrounded actually by city limits. And you wanted to incorporate that. Now there's multiple steps that you can go about to do that, but that process has become a little arduous and a little long. Doing it legislatively took about a half a page of paper and getting at least 87 other people to agree to let that happen. But those are kinds of things because it was a local bill, helped the town, nobody else was impacted, didn't cost the state a thing to do that. It was easy to convince all the other members to allow that legislation to pass. That is a local bill. A public bill, let's talk about, just as an example, is canceling the I-77 tolls. That was a public bill. It would require statewide agreement by every member, and it had budget impacts and project impacts on every other member. Passing something like that is virtually impossible if it has negative consequences on a lot of districts. So those things have to be factored and considered. I know the towns did this a while ago, but this is really important to consider. And that is, do you use a lobbyist or do you not use a lobbyist? And I would tell you, it depends. To consider, it depends on the complexity of the problem, how big of aspirin you're asking somebody to need to take, if you will, if it's a difficult problem and going to be painful. And do you have the ability to invest the continued time to help navigate that legislation through the process? Large, complex asks oftentimes will span multiple sessions. You will, the magistrate, to an example, might be a little bit of that. It's not as easy as straightforward as we think it should be. And things that we stay after for multiple years and periods. There are people, there's like anything else in life. There are, lobbyists that are just absolutely terrible. There are people who are basically good managers of the process and good day-to-day people, not going to light the house on fire, but can help you. And then there's the handful that if you got something really big you need done, you're not going to get it done without them. They are critical to the process, the really good guys. They can actually help navigate and write the legislative language for you. They've got the relationships. I'll say this, and I know we're recording it. I mean, one example is going to be if you had something that was critical and it was hundreds of millions of dollars, a bond package or something. A person like Tom Apodaca, who's the former rules chairman, second in tier, has his own lobbying firm. He has the ear and the ability to walk into Phil Berger's office at any time, has as much influence and maybe more than probably 2/3 of the elected senators currently. That is an invaluable relationship and ability that resides in a person that can help you navigate the process, because he knows it well and he has the relationships to nudge and arm twist and apply it in the right way to help guide legislation through. And they can tell you when things aren't going to move, which is sometimes hard to hear. So lobbyists come with a price tag, and that's an issue that any entity has to balance as you're going forward. But they do have a purpose. There are organizations, and I listed a few of them here, that it's a good way you can find out who the top lobbyists are. You can also find out who lobbies by topic or industry that has expertise in certain areas, which is also helpful. And the same thing, there are groups, even the chamber, that ranks all the members. It's not just a popularity contest in those. The rankings are typically done by the organizations, they're done by the members, they're done by the lobbyists. The lobbyists are ranking all the members as well. And the effectiveness is perhaps one of the most important things that you want to look at when you're going forward to try to move legislation. The more effective a member typically indicates their ability to get legislation passed and move. And if you're at the bottom of that list, you still need the vote. So it's not anybody to, quote, ignore, but it's not going to be somebody most likely able to advocate or manage a bill through passage. Same thing happens. There's associations. I know, with all the hotel and restaurant issues going on around COVID, there's a North Carolina Retail Association, there's a Merchants Association that all are advocating. I know a lot of the elected officials are familiar with the League of Municipalities. And I think, John, you'd mentioned earlier that they've started compiling their top 10 list of issues. So they come forward, they're working the legislature. And this accentuates the fact that we're sitting here and we're going to build a set of priorities, either individually by organization or for the chamber. And you got to realize we're one of hundreds of bodies doing the exact same thing right now. So we're going to come with a list, and so are 200 or 300 other bodies. So when members sitting in their office and meeting constituents and meeting with groups and listening to these needs, just realize you're not just competing with the priorities in your list, but you're competing with lots of priorities. So those are things, again, to balance and be able to how you navigate that. Comment I wanted to make between the long session and short session is you got to have a sense, is this something we can do short and quickly? Or is this something that's a long commitment to do? It will change how you assign resources to manage and navigate or run the bill, as we kind of referred to it internally. Long session will typically go, in good days, we'll go right up to the 4th of July. Again, this is a part-time legislature, but when they're in session, they go in Monday evening, and they're in session till usually noon on Thursday, going back to the district on Friday. Long sessions have gone into September, October sometimes. And we did that this last time because of the budget conflict between the governor and the legislature on keeping it from being vetoed. People say we didn't have or pass a budget. That's actually not true. The budget was passed in bipartisan fashion. And then the governor vetoed it over Medicaid expansion, which is, that's his prerogative to do. And that's his tool to lever for the priorities and needs that he wants to see in the budget. And so you use all tools available. Differences between what you're doing and working on bills. This is kind of important subtlety to stick away in your notebook. Long session, basically anything's open. We can take anything we want to the legislature and ask for it. Literally anything. You want a public swimming pool, you want to support a professional franchise, you want to add a new roadway, you want whatever, ask away. Then that's going to typically go through a typical legislative process. Local bills can go faster and can and some of the rules will be a little bit different, but you're typically getting assigned initially to what's referred to as the Rules Committee. Rules have changed both in the House and the Senate because that's where bills go to get first prioritization. And from rules, they get assigned to which committees they need to run through. So if we had a restaurant, something that was impacting all the restaurant businesses, or a tax that we wanted to collect for them, or occupancy or prepared food that we wanted to argue through the legislature, that's going to probably go through commerce. It's going to go through finance because it has budget impacts. So they're figuring out where that runs, and they're doing much more of a gatekeeping function. So it's really important to understand where it's going in rules and start jumping on it right from the get-go, and then following that committee assignment structure as it flows through. A bill for the long session that passes one chamber but doesn't pass the other chamber in the long session is eligible to be heard in the short session. Short session has defined limits on what can be heard. Everything that began in the long session, or anything that goes in the long, does not apply to the short. There's very limited things that can be heard. So in the short session, a bill that passed one chamber, you'll see things I'd put in the sheet, something called LRCs, Legislative Review Committees, study bills, things from the joint oversight. Every committee, when they're out of session, are still meeting. People don't realize that. They're still doing work. They're writing and working on bills. They're just not voting on them yet. So anything that's being worked on, and that is a really good time to, I don't want to say sneak things through, but it's a way to keep things under the radar and get a lot of legislative work prepared and then voted on when you come back. Because those things are all eligible to be voted on in the short session, but new items cannot be introduced. And if it doesn't pass in the short session, but you're close, say, in the second chamber, then but it doesn't pass, then it starts the entire process all over. So there's some criticality in timing, because you will lose all that work and you have to start the whole process completely over if you don't get it through those things. Things that you want to work on. If we're trying to pass legislation and we have priorities, it will be important to identify which committee it's primarily going to. The most important people, and it's probably obvious, but not always intuitive, are going to be the committee chairs. Most of the time, they're co-chairs. Most of the major committees, so whether that's education, state and local government, judiciary, healthcare, wherever those issues fall, what's not commonly known is the chairs have the ability to determine whether a bill is even heard. So you would think they're just the process and the parliamentarian for that committee. No, there's a lot of power that resides in the committee chairs that's not formally, communicated. But the chairs, if the chairs don't agree on a bill and somebody wants to bury it right at that point, it's just buried, and they won't have to explain it to a soul why. And you may not even know why. So first thing to do is, if you've got a bill and you know the committees, you got to start building those relationships and educating the members on that bill. What's the most common thing done is people are putting together on each major initiative something referred to as just a point sheet. Give me the talking points, 3 or 4 or 5 reasons why to do this. And we'll come back again to that last sheet. So those become very important, that you can articulate the reason and the justification, the rationale for your piece of legislation in about 2 or 3 minutes. Because again, that's what you're going to get face time until it gets into a committee structure and actually being heard and worked on. So with that, what I want to do is take you through this second page that I sent out. And this is a set of questions. What you're getting it also, just in preface, is you're getting the gospel according to Jeff. It's not time tested, but I still think it's fairly true. And this is how the process unfolds.
Jeff, can I interrupt? Some folks on the call didn't get the sheet of paper that you're referencing. Do you want me to share that?
You can share that with folks. And absolutely, what we're going to do right now is go through that list of questions. And these are questions I have pasted in the back of my notebook, and I would ask about every bill, and most of the members do. And they get asked directly or indirectly through the committee process. And these aren't always shared, but these questions for the pieces of issues or priorities that we're going to want to take to the legislature, you are and we are so far ahead of the game and better off if we can answer each of these questions about your desired piece of a statute that you want to move forward, because they're going to get asked by somebody. And if you can provide the answers, you can stage and influence the direction of this. So, and it really does. Can you articulate what's the problem we're trying to solve with this? And in a sense, who's impacted by that? You know, why do we care about removing donut holes? What does that do? Who cares? As an example, and when we take that legislation forward. And people, believe it or not, want to know, the constituents' voices absolutely matter. So all those piles of emails people send in, all the phone calls that come in, everybody thinks, well, everybody ignores those. I would tell you, no. Now, are they reading them all? Absolutely not. But they're tallying. It's sort of like taking a poll. You know, if you've got a massive amount of people against something, it's going to be very hard to get a piece of legislation passed. And so they want to know exactly who is benefiting. And for individual members, they want to know, is it benefiting people in my district who vote for me? First, generically, it's a good thing for all North Carolinians. It's understandable, but it's still about taking care of your constituents. Who requested the legislation? And that seems maybe counterintuitive, because it should be obvious the chamber's requesting this and the League of Municipalities in behalf of the towns. But it's really, people want to peel the onion back. Are there individuals, are there groups within the association who are really pushing for this? And it matters. As an example, trying to move the craft beer cap legislation a couple years ago, it absolutely would help the craft brewers across the entire state. But the bottom line, it was Red Oak and OMB, the two largest, who were already at the cap, that benefited most. People appreciate and want to understand who's that impacting and how and where. What does it cost? That's sometimes hard to quantify. One of the things you need to understand is any bill that goes forward that's going to have a budget implication, first and foremost, is always going to have to run through finance. Finance handles all legislation that has a budget impact. And if it does, there's something called a fiscal note that has to be prepared by fiscal research on that bill. And they basically go and calculate what the budget impact is for the state. If we're working on a piece of legislation and we know beforehand it's going to have that, and we've got a member running that bill or preparing it for us, and it's cost, you want to just make sure that member works with fiscal research and ask them to prepare that fiscal note beforehand. And seems silly, but who's going to pay for it? In other words, is this going to require taxes that are supporting it? Is a fee based? Is it revenue? Where are those revenues to support whatever initiatives? Or is it something locally that's going to be covered once it's changed? Or in best case, there's no cost and nobody's going to be required to remunerate the fees of any kind. I tell you, number 6 is really important, and that sometimes is not obvious. But who's going to gain financially and who's going to gain politically? Financially becomes important. Dan Clodfelter is just one example. And his law firm represented the city of Charlotte in a lot of work in the airport. And when bills come forward and they have a financial impact on the given member, they are required to recuse themselves from voting or even advocating. They can't even advocate a position on a bill that they would financially benefit from personally. But I think those become things that members want to know as they're going through. So when you go down this list in committees, this will get asked every single time eventually, which is who's for it, who's against it. And by that, I don't mean the members, I mean which organizations. If we were running something that impacted the sheriffs, they wanted to know whether the Sheriff's Association supported this legislation or were against it. If we were doing a hotel occupancy bill, they wanted to know whether the Hotel Association overall, do they support it or are they against it, or they just don't care? Neutral is a fine position, but as a general rule, members and committees don't like voting for things when you've got opposition to it, especially if it's a strong voice and a strong group. One time versus reoccurring, and what that refers to. So being public or local is important to keep in mind, as I mentioned. And one time or recurring, is this going and ask that's got to be funded on a recurring basis? As an example, we put funding in $500,000 in a piece of legislation to take care of hydrilla management in our lakes. And primarily it was written for Lake Norman. And it changed the thing because it was not a one-time hit. And actually we put it in for perpetuity. So every year there's going to be funds to take care of doing hydrilla and weed management in our state lakes. Is different. And I will tell you something that is only a one-time hit. So maybe we got funding for equipment for Davidson's fire department. One time, it is, as strange as this is going to sound, pretty easy to do. And things that cost, and this is going to sound strange, if you got something that costs $500,000 or less, and it's a one-time need, and it's a local bill, you got a pretty high probability of getting something through if you don't have opposition to it. But if you've got something that costs, a couple $1,000,000 and it's going to run for 10 or 20 years, and it's a public bill, a lot more, the lift is a lot harder. So you have to have an appreciation and understanding what you're asking. The committee is just understanding the flow and the chairs that we talked about. Sponsors, every bill, something some may be familiar with, somebody's going to be the primary author of a bill. Somebody's writing this thing and it's their bill, or they've been asked to. It may not even be their pet project, if you will, or their top priority. It's a group that's come to them. They're supportive of the group, and they've asked them to, lead and manage pushing this bill through. So they're the author. They're working with the staff writing the bill and the lobbyists writing the bill. And that's a good time to have influence on looking at the language right at the get-go and trying to participate in that process, which you can do. But here's the key. The only time you can see that bill is if the author of the bill releases or provides permission. No other member can look at a bill that's in bill drafting, without the permission of that author. So what happens sometimes, which is kind of strange, is some great ideas floating around and 6 people are writing the same damn bill in bill drafting, but the bill drafters can't tell the 6 members, by the way, you're working on the doggone same thing, with a few different nuances so they can work on it together. It's a little inefficient, but it protects confidentiality. And then you can only have 3 sponsors on the bill. So you'll have typically 3 legislators, 3 senators, 3 House members that are the primary sponsors. Their names go on it. And then you can co-sponsor a bill, which is basically every day a list of all the bills that have been filed. They're officially ready to be assigned to a committee. Everybody has like a 24-hour period to throw their name on it as a co-sponsor. All that really gets you the opportunity to do is to know, do you have enough votes to pass a bill? And it's very rare to have 20 or 30 co-sponsors, but it does happen on occasion. The other thing, which is a harder thing to do, and this is where we need to develop the relationships with our different members in the Senate and the House, is to know what the caucus position is on a bill. The House and the Senate operate very differently. The House having 120 members and the Senate having 50 members. And then within the majority and the minority caucuses, just the numbers are so much smaller in the Senate. The House has kind of factions within the caucuses even. So there's kind of groups, and they're much more vocal individually than in the Senate side. Having obviously been on that side of the chamber, little inside baseball, it happens, but on such rare occasion, and this will help us when we're navigating a piece of legislation, is to know what the majority caucus position is, because they're basically discussing and taking informal head counts of who's going to vote for a bill or against a bill. So I always remember like the second or third time walking on the floor to vote and walking in the doors past the sergeant at arms and hearing the sergeant at arms going, I wonder if anybody has an idea how this bill's going to vote. Well, if the majority is for or against, that vote's probably already predetermined before a button's pushed on the chamber floor in the Senate. So you really have to be ahead of the game and know, working with your member, when it's going to be heard in caucus, and that can save you a lot of grief and aggravation of chasing things that either aren't going to happen or it's already done. So don't upset things and holler and scream and whatever when it's already taken care of, versus, there's some open ends and we need to address this and that. That's going to come out of caucus meetings, not even the committees. Committees are, again, for the most part, are just airing who's for and against. That's really the big things, and any tweaks that might happen are going to happen in committees. So that's kind of the magic. Why? And also 87 is kind of the magic number in Raleigh, and 87 is just any bill that passes, you need 87 people to vote for it besides just yourself. And that's being, half of 50 senators plus one, or 26, and half of 120 House members plus one. And that's how you get to 87 votes. So if you don't have 87 people or 86 people agreeing with the member who's running it, nothing's moving. So whatever you do, you're still going to need 87 people. So that's a little bit of what the process we're really going to go through as we prioritize things, as we list things that are important. So what I'd like to see us do is prioritize, what are the things your entity, town, whomever, would like the chamber to be a supporter of, an advocate for, versus what are the things as members we need to be the lead on. The chamber needs to be the person carrying the torch, if you will, as we start the legislative session. And here's the real challenge for us. I know, John, you mentioned like the League of Municipalities trying to get it down to 10 items, and that's good. I think we're happy to help and advocate for a laundry list as long as it can go and be supportive of. But if we've got something we really, really want to push, it'd be nice to create two lists. The things that were really easy lifts that shouldn't be a big deal, that we can just go take care of. And that could be as long or short a list as possible. But if there's things that's going to really require some significant lift and legislation being passed, I'd like to see that list. And this may be the challenge between now and the end of January. 3 items. What are 3 things you want the chamber to go actually see something turn into legislation that's voted on and passed during this session? Because if we're working on more than that, we're all volunteers. We're all got other things going on. And if you got too many things, it's just the probability you won't get any.
Jeff, may I interact?
Sure.
Mayor Anarella, I know at one point we had a North Mecklenburg group. There was all 3 towns were meeting as a group, and you actually crafted, I think, during the long session last time, the 3-town legislative agenda. Are you guys working on that?
Well, that group has not met due to COVID. The mayors have met a bunch of times, but we haven't in particular talked about our legislative agendas. I think we were waiting to get everybody's items together and then going through that. But that's a good point. We should coordinate that and move forward.
And I know this will be a little awkward because we've got a number of people on, but maybe we take everybody off mute, as crazy as it sounds, and we'll sort of raise hands politely. First, do we have any questions? That's a lot of stuff to throw at everybody. Some of it, a lot of you may be familiar with, a lot of it may be new, but I'm just curious if anything we need to clarify or address or.
Yeah, I've got one, Jeff.
Go ahead, Woody.
It's really related to, I guess, a couple of the items that are pretty much on the top of our list.
Okay.
And an example is it relates to the funding situation with NCDOT. The fact that many of our projects are stuck because of funding and delayed and all that sort of thing. I'm not sure if it takes legislative action to unstick those, or if it's something that we lobby and deal with through DOT. So how do you segregate those two items and deal with them?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to impact changing in itself, just funding by itself. This is, and again, everybody needs to recognize you're getting my view of things. So we may have different people have different strokes. My perspective would be we need to work two groups to work on that list. One is, first of all, are those regional projects that everybody's impacted? Those would be in one group. I would segment them versus those that are just road projects that are specific for one municipality. Separate those out. Then there's two groups you need to work. You need to work NCDOT directly. Well, I'd actually tell you there's three groups, and you know these already. You need to work NCDOT. You need to work within the MUMPO structure, you know, CPTRO here, and you need to work within the chairs of the transportation committees. So for us, this is where it's real critical. On the House side, you want to, you know, proximity, we want to work with John Torbett. And we'll need to follow because the chairs haven't been assigned yet, but it's most likely Torbett will still be the senior chair of transportation in the House. And I'm guessing Tom McGinnis will become the senior chair for the Senate on transportation because Jim Davis did not return. He ran for Congress. So those two people, those relationships get really important. And then, you know, working with the leadership within NCDOT. And there's a lot of folks that have a really good, we're fortunate locally because there's a lot of folks that have a relationship with Eric Boyette, who's the new secretary. And I would tell you just personally, and I'll say it publicly, he's a really good guy, very reasonable. He's been in the department a long time. So I look for that would be the three-prong approach to sit down. But we first need to understand what are the projects. It's kind of answering those questions, right? That we walk through on those projects. And I assume some of these things are been impacted by the delay in the fund, you know, that NCDOT overspent their salaries by like $400 million.
Yeah. Can I dovetail on this comment?
Sure, Mike, go ahead.
CRTPO met Wednesday night. This came on up, and we're in the process of creating a strategic plan, which will be the first time for CRTPO, and being more active representing CRTPO needs to Raleigh is going to come out of that process. And I'm already had Mr. Cook reach out to Representative Tolbert to see if he can come to CRTPO. And we're going to start doing that, start being more aggressive in reaching out to these personalities. What was the senator's name you mentioned, Jeff?
Tom McGinnis.
What is it?
McGinnis, McGinnis.
Okay, and I'll reach out to him.
Chairman of Iron Horse Auctions.
Okay.
That's his
and then we'll reach out to Boyette too. You know, this, like you're right, it's a multi-pronged attack or outreach. I shouldn't have used the word attack, outreach. But yes, all the municipalities in our CRTP footprint are very interested in getting this back online.
And it's worth spending time to go meet with the chairs. And then once you figure out who the other co-chairs are, you want to work that relationship.
Well, I may be in Raleigh more this year than last.
So that on transportation, that's what I would suggest, Mayor.
Jeff, I know Martha with Duke Energy has to roll off pretty soon from a utility provider, energy provider. Martha, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Chairman Tarte. You know, and I know you've done a lot of work with Duke Energy, and we've had some restructuring in the government affairs. Kathy Hawkins retired, and my executive retired. Kevin McLaughlin is to have that dual role. So I report directly to Kevin, and some restructuring is going there. I think with my limited time, I want to say that, you know, Duke Energy is our hometown utility. We are headquartered in Mecklenburg County. We have approximately 14,000 employees and retirees, and provide a lot of funding in Mecklenburg County because of being headquarters. And as a business community and a group, I know that's appreciated. And I don't want to lose sight of that, because there may be, there may be some challenges to that as we move along. So what we have presented to Bill, and he can have that, is one simple statement, not very simple, of course, but to continue powering our home state's competitive economy, we support legislative action to reduce carbon emissions, modernize the grid, and keep energy prices as affordable as possible. We were one of the ones that worked on the Governor Cooper's Order Number 80 to address climate change, and we worked collaboratively with 160 other stakeholders to write legislation and get working on that. Our goal is to be 24/7 reliability, modernize the grid, where I can ping a meter to tell if somebody's on. We can sectionalize outages so that we can bring people back on that aren't impacted by a circuit, that a tree has fallen on or something, very quickly. So important as we see climate change has increased storms, and supporting the economic viability of our North Carolina communities. It's really important to us. We see ourselves as an energy provider for the last 100 years, and we want to be viable for the next 100 years. To do that, we have to, we're not building large power plants and putting them in the rate base for 30 to 40 years. The construct of how we do business is changing, and we want to be on the forefront of that, and continue to be a leader in that industry and in our state and in Mecklenburg County. So thanks for that opportunity that shout out, Bill. We appreciate it.
Well, a couple things just to share with you. One is you hired Ryan Minto, for legislative affairs, and Ryan is well respected, just so you know, across the entire building. Ryan was an excellent choice, and again, he commands a lot of respect even at his age. He's a young man who is very bright and very talented. It's relationships on the energy side. And you probably know this, but I'll just parrot it so others that work in this area. John Zoka will be critical on the House side because he's running all that. He's a clean energy guy, which is a good thing. And then of course you've got your strongest advocate, and the person who controls the reins on all the energy is going to be Paul Newton. Senator Newton is nothing energy is going to pass in Raleigh that Paul's not supportive of. It's just, that's the power in the chairmanship. And he has the ability individually to kill something that would hurt. And there's no magic. Everybody recognizes the significance of Duke Energy, and not just the state of North Carolina, but in the Southeast. You've been a great corporate citizen. And so things that we can help. EO 80 has been important. I talked to Ryan about HB 330 on Zoka's bill around the sustainability practice areas. Those are things that are important. Technology-wise, introducing technology, it'll be important to stay close to Ralph Heiss on the Senate side, who's also the Deputy Pro Tem, but he's the IT expertise that's in the Senate, and then Jason Sain. And Jason's a huge advocate, and he's also the Senior Finance Chair. So those are advocates that will help. The one thing that would be interesting, I know is a topic that's going to be looked at and start, is what's going to happen with our nuclear footprint, because we're already at the half-life, about 40 years into facilities that have about an 80-year lifespan. And if it takes 10 years to refurbish or build a new one with some of the newer technologies, how are we going to transition and prepare for that? So that's something as a chamber, because McGuire is literally, I can look out my window and I can see the top of McGuire. Right. So McGuire is the lifeblood for us in this region. And how do we ensure that kind of clean, efficient, low cost energy? And that's probably an area the chamber needs to be advocating as well. And that's something where we all need to sit down and strategize, both mayor, the elected municipalities, Duke Energy leadership, chamber leadership. That's probably an issue worth us agreeing on what's the direction we would want to advocate.
Well, we can certainly help with that, and are glad to do it. We're proud to have McGuire and in our footprint, and Catawba at the very south end of the footprint. So we appreciate that. Good. Thank you.
Jeff, I know we have representatives from Energy United, and you also touched on the technology, and I know Michael Tank with Spectrum is also on the line. I don't know if they have any specific concerns.
I see that funny sweatshirt Mike's wearing, but being in Illinois, of course, it's Go Big Ten, right?
I wear today because today is the redo of the IU Purdue game. So for Indiana folks, that's a big day.
Big day.
But Bill, thanks. Yeah, there will be some legislation coming up this year, especially with the expansion of broadband into rural. We all know the impact of with COVID, the need for broadband everywhere. So we have been working through various grants, through the GREAT grant program, through the RDOF program at the federal level. And we know that there's a lot more conversation to be done on that front. So we are going to be we want to be involved in all the conversations, and we are going to be supportive of legislation to expand broadband into rural areas. So, but as you get into the details, the devil's in the details. So that's kind of our big thing.
Mike, that'll be important. Maybe again, it's a sidebar conversation with kind of our public policy kind of ad hoc group within the chamber, how we can help you. Obviously, the state CIO position is yet to be, they're going to announce. They've got an interim. We've gone, Eric Boyette was actually at a year ago, and then Tracy Dokes replaced him, and now Ms. Parsons Parrish has replaced her, but only on an interim role. And the governor has not made an official announcement on the new state CIO. I sat on the state IT governance board. That's a group probably worth spending time with. Some of the key people in that organization or on that board. But the broadband is a big issue, and it's been, again, a long-term thing. Starting back, something that I think you recognize, Dan Forrest picked up the ball and was running with federal funds, but I'm not as familiar and close to what the immediate steps that the governor has planned for broadband. I know it has a rural focus. And again, that's where we need to figure out, is that a role? I mean, easy to advocate for, I think, for the chamber. Bill, I don't mean to speak for all the members, but it doesn't impact us immediately right here, I don't think, but it's a good thing for the state. So depending on how we can lend help or our name or credence or weight, those are the types of things that are kind of more policy positions, I think, for the Lake Norman Chamber.
Yeah, I know that they're going to be looking at some of the tier structure and some of the other things along that line. But I think you're right. That's probably more of a policy rather than a legislative issue for the chamber to be involved with. But I'll be happy to have further conversations as we move forward with everybody, and want to be involved in those conversations as well.
Good. Other comments or issues to bring forward or groups?
I know we have both officials from Atrium and Novant representing the healthcare sector. I don't know if Luke or Lois from Atrium or Luke from Novant has any specific concerns they want to address.
I'll be real brief before my dog starts howling here. A couple things we're just watching going into the year: Medicaid transformation, July 1st, North Carolina, I believe that has to be in place. So we'll be watching that. Another thing in response to COVID, a lot of telehealth waivers and I guess, let's say, regulations have been loosened due to COVID. So we're kind of watching that as well going forward. Those are two things I'll just briefly mention.
And Lois, do you have anything from Atrium's perspective?
No, thank you, Bill. I appreciate you asking, but I'm just here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Well, a couple of things in that regard that we probably should monitor, because of COVID. COVID's still going to be the thing that is top of mind and sucks most of the oxygen out of the room. Pardon, probably not a good analogy given COVID.
True.
But the Congress anticipates passing the next tranche of CARES Act 2. And then what the state ends up doing will spend a great deal of time very quickly on how they allocate the CARES Act money or hold on to. And we've still got some CARES Act money. So that would be an interesting task force, for a lack of a better way. Not that I would ever suggest putting together a task force of any kind, to work on understanding where those allocations and advocating for certain things. One of those most likely will result in funds going back to the SBA, whether we do another round of payroll protection and loans that'll be available. So having some of the banks, I know Richard, his bank has done they got deep expertise around this, but locally, how do we advocate and get in front of? Because when those monies become available, depending how much, we need to understand, because they tend to go very quickly. And how do we protect and ensure our local businesses are at the forefront of being able to take advantage of those types of programs as they become available? So we need to figure out, how do we hear, how do we kind of keep our ear to the doorways to know what's going on in that area.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I should have mentioned. Is we're obviously monitoring, as well as I'm sure most people are, is what's going to be coming in terms of that next round of relief funding.
And the corollary to that, and I don't know what the hospitals, I know initially, I hear through secondhand that, the initial allocations of the vaccine, nobody knew for sure how many were coming. It's just when they show up, how many. But to the extent I hear that we're going to have a hockey stick distribution come the first of the year. And if there's things we can do to help, or you guys are plugged in close enough, working through DHHS and with Secretary Cohen to more upfront to know what's at least regionally coming, so we can prepare and communicate, So because I haven't heard how fast we'll get the 1A and 1B folks covered versus when we'll start getting particularly into the long-term care and facilities and things like that in the next tranche, and then preparing for, as I think was mentioned, the teachers and some of the other higher priority at-risk groups. And I think it's important. It would be important that the chamber can be a source, at least with others, to how do we communicate that out and getting accurate information other than just social media information, right? That is coming from a trusted source that's, reliable and accurate. And maybe that's another place we can have a role as a chamber, that it can go through the chamber website as well as your own individual healthcare organizations.
Yeah, and Jeff, if you, or Bill, if you would like us to bring Dr. Passaretti, who is our infection prevention physician with Atrium Health. The reason I was late getting on this call is because she was speaking this morning to the Fort Mill Economic Development Council about this very topic. And I'd be happy to have her speak and provide more information on that. She was the first person in the state of North Carolina to get the vaccine. And so she can attest to the side effects or none with that. She's doing really well. And so we can certainly talk to you about that rollout.
And that might be a good, come back to a good Focus Friday topic. Again,
Yeah.
Specifically the COVID vaccine process, and doing that in maybe January or February, as we have more information that we can educate everybody.
Sure. Let me know. I'm happy to help set that up.
It'd be great. So one of the things that we're going to need to do is have, and I guess we can be the conduit within the public policy group, is, and I know you've been forwarding this to Bill, but I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, taking your legislative lists, and if you can kind of rank them, it's simply A, B, and C items, or 1, 2, 3, but your A, B, C items. And it'd really be helpful if the A items were no more than 10% of your list. So if you can rank things, that would really help us. And if you can, and one other identification is where you've got multiple groups or entities that support the same piece, that would also be helpful to delineate. So as the mayors, as you guys said, where you've got all 3 towns or multiple towns that support this initiative, that will be helpful. And not to say, well, that's where the attention and focus will go, but the reality is that typically ends up being a higher priority, at least for Raleigh. So other things, comments, we're kind of, we've got a few minutes.
Richard, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but looks like the Senate is and Congress is coming together on a PPP from a First National Bank perspective. Do you want to share any of what we're hearing out there?
Well, I wish I had a lot of good information on that, but a good bit of it is still in negotiations and discussions, rather, as part of another CARES Act. So there's lots of facets to it, as you and I have seen on some preliminary information that was shared with us. And so we're just kind of preparing to go through the process again, making sure that our systems are active and ready to take new applications that we'll get, I'm sure, right before they're active. Last time we had to jump through some very new, very quick hoops. And as they say, build the airplane around us in midair. We're still expecting that to be a similar process this second round, but we're a little better prepared and we know what to expect. So I think it's going to go smoother. A lot of clients we're staying in communication with, but it does seem to be focused on at-risk businesses, industries. So we'll reach out to those clients directly. And then I just say, keep in touch with your banker and your relationship and make sure that the communication is fluid so that when they do turn on the faucet, you're active and you're ready to respond quickly before money's run out. There's no guarantees this time there'll be a second tranche. So I would just promote active communication. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. I know we're coming up at the end of the program. We've gotten other industries that have sent us some information. I know we've gotten information from our CPAs. But again, I would recommend anybody that's either on the call today or see this in the future, if you have a list of priorities, as Jeff just spoke to, please get those to me. I'll make sure Jeff, as the public policy chair, gets a list of those activities and priorities, and so that we can put them together as a legislative agenda. Jeff, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
No, just I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen. Hopefully this is a little bit helpful, trying to provide a little insight in how the process works so we can navigate it more efficiently. Again, I really encourage everybody. I know you've got a long list and lots of needs. We serve our constituencies and our businesses, but please get a prioritized list to Bill. And then we will kind of reach back and work within the public policy group to figure out how we can best advocate for your positions and needs.
Well, on behalf of the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce, we want to thank everybody for joining today. And we hope everybody has a safe and happy holiday season, and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Bring on 21.
New Year, too.